What happens when those closest to you show their true colors? Sometimes the greatest protection comes from unexpected places. Please like this video if it resonates with you, and let me know in the comments what you would have done in this situation. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about family, resilience, and finding strength when you need it most. Dawn breaks gently over Millbrook, Vermont, the way it has for the 38 years I have called this place home. I am Eleanor Whitmore, though most folks around here just call me Ellie. At 72, I have learned that mornings hold a special kind of peace, that quiet hour before the world stirs awake, when you can sit with your coffee and remember all the people who made your life worth living. My kitchen window faces east, catching the first rays of sunlight as they dance across the hills. This old Victorian house has been my sanctuary since 1986, when my late husband Robert and I moved here from Boston. Bob was a high school principal then, passionate about education and young people. I taught elementary school for 35 years, watching generations of children grow up in this tight-knit community. Bob passed away 11 years ago after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. Losing him felt like losing half of myself. We had been married for 41 years, sharing everything from morning coffee to evening walks around our neighborhood. The silence in the house afterward was deafening. Some nights I still expect to hear his footsteps on the creaky floorboards upstairs, or his gentle humming while he worked in his study. Our only child, David, was my lifeline during those dark months after Bob's death. David had inherited his father's caring nature and his dedication to making the world better. As a social worker specializing in elder care services, he understood the challenges facing people my age. He would drive up from Burlington every weekend, checking on me, helping with household repairs, making sure I wasn't isolating myself too much. I remember how concerned he was about my living alone in such a large house. "Mom, this place is too big for one person," he would say, looking around at the 4 bedrooms and wraparound porch. "Maybe you should consider downsizing, moving somewhere with less maintenance." But I couldn't bear the thought of leaving. Every room held memories of Bob, of David's childhood, of holiday gatherings and birthday celebrations. The rose garden Bob had planted for our 20th anniversary still bloomed each spring. The reading nook where I had helped David with homework still had pencil marks on the windowsill from his math calculations. "This house chose us, David," I would tell him. "I am not ready to say goodbye yet." David was 34 and had never married, dedicating himself completely to his work, helping elderly clients navigate complex care systems. He often worked late into the evenings, visiting homebound seniors or attending family meetings about care plans. I worried he was sacrificing his personal happiness for his career, but he always insisted he found fulfillment in helping others. Everything changed 3 years ago when David met Scarlett Beaumont at a professional conference in Manchester. She was a wellness coach who specialized in holistic lifestyle transformation and ran workshops on spiritual healing and energy alignment. David came home from that conference, absolutely glowing with excitement. "Mom, I met someone extraordinary," he told me during one of his weekend visits. "She has this incredible energy, this way of seeing possibilities that most people miss. Scarlett understands that true wellness comes from aligning your inner spirit with your outer environment." When he first brought Scarlett to meet me, I tried to keep an open mind. She was undeniably attractive, tall and willowy, with auburn hair that she wore in elaborate braids and pale green eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She dressed in flowing fabrics and wore multiple silver bracelets that chimed softly when she moved. "What a charming home," she said that first evening, walking through my living room with an appraising gaze. "Such authentic Victorian character." The energy flow in these older houses can be quite powerful when properly channeled. I watched her examine my family photographs on the mantelpiece, noting how she lingered over the pictures of Bob and me in our younger years, and especially the photos of David's college graduation and early career achievements. "You must find it challenging to maintain such a large property by yourself," she continued, settling into Bob's favorite armchair without being invited. "All these rooms, this extensive garden, it must be overwhelming for someone at your stage of life." Something in her tone put me on edge, though I couldn't quite identify what. David seemed oblivious to any undercurrents, focused entirely on Scarlett's every word, as she described her work helping people release limiting beliefs about their living situations. During dinner, Scarlett dominated the conversation with stories about her clients, wealthy individuals who had transformed their lives through her guidance. She spoke about manifesting abundance and releasing attachment to material possessions, all while her eyes continued to inventory my china cabinet and antique furniture. I have helped so many people understand that clinging to the past prevents them from embracing their highest potential, she said, gesturing with her fork. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is help our elderly relatives transition to more appropriate living arrangements. David nodded enthusiastically, completely missing the implication. I found myself growing increasingly uncomfortable with how easily she discussed other people's private family decisions. The engagement came just 6 months later. David proposed on Valentine's Day with a ring that must have cost him several months' salary. Scarlett accepted with tears of joy, immediately beginning to plan an elaborate wedding ceremony that would incorporate sacred elements from various spiritual traditions. We want to create a celebration that honors both our souls' journey together, she explained when they announced their engagement, something that transcends traditional religious limitations and embraces universal love principles. The wedding took place the following October in a meadow, just outside town, with Scarlett wearing a custom-designed dress made from ethically sourced organic materials and David in a linen suit that Scarlett had selected. The ceremony included sage burning, crystal blessings, and readings from spiritual texts I had never heard of. As I watched my son exchange vows with this woman, I noticed how Scarlett's vows focused heavily on their shared mission and aligned life purpose, while David's were filled with promises of devotion and support. Even then, something felt unbalanced about their dynamic. The real changes began after they returned from their honeymoon in Costa Rica, where they had attended a couples retreat focused on conscious relationship building. Scarlett moved into David's apartment in Burlington, but she quickly began suggesting that they needed more space for her expanding wellness practice. Eleanor's house would be perfect for our needs, I overheard her telling David during one of their visits. All that unused space could be transformed into healing rooms and workshop areas. Plus, she clearly needs more support as she ages. David seemed torn between his desire to please his new wife and his respect for my independence. "Mom's always been so self-sufficient," he would say. "I don't want to pressure her into anything she is not ready for." But Scarlett was persistent, always framing her suggestions in terms of concern for my well-being. "David, your mother is over 70 and living alone in a house that is far too large for her needs. What if she falls and cannot reach a phone? What if something happens during one of these Vermont winters when the roads are impassable?" Gradually, I began to notice changes in David's behavior during his visits. He would walk through the house with a more critical eye, pointing out maintenance issues I had managed perfectly well for years. "Mom, this porch railing is getting loose," he would say. "And when was the last time you had the furnace serviced?" Scarlett would nod sympathetically. It is so much responsibility for one person. In some cultures, multi-generational living is considered the most natural arrangement. Everyone benefits when families support each other's highest good. About a year into their marriage, David approached me with what he called a family discussion. We were sitting in my kitchen on a Sunday morning in November, the first snow of the season, dusting the windows. "Mom, Scarlett and I have been talking about our future plans," he began, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "We are hoping to expand her practice. Maybe start offering residential retreats for people seeking deeper spiritual transformation." I waited, sensing there was more coming. "This house would be perfect for that kind of work," he continued. "We could convert some of the bedrooms into healing spaces, use the dining room for group workshops, and you would have built-in companionship and support." Scarlett leaned forward eagerly. "Eleanor, this could be exactly what you need at this stage of your life, a sense of purpose beyond just maintaining an empty house. You could be part of something meaningful, helping other people on their wellness journeys." I looked at my son, trying to see past Scarlett's influence to the caring young man I had raised. "David, "What exactly are you proposing?" "We would all live here together," he said. "Scarlett could run her business from the house, and we would help you with the upkeep and daily management. It would be like having a family again, instead of you living alone." The idea filled me with dread, though I couldn't explain exactly why. "I appreciate your concern, but I am managing quite well on my own. I have my routines, my independence, my privacy." Scarlett's smile never wavered, but something shifted in her eyes. "Of course, we completely understand your attachment to your current lifestyle. Change can be challenging, especially for people who have become set in their ways." That phrase, "set in my ways," stung more than I expected. Was that how they saw me, as a stubborn old woman clinging to the past? David reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, we are not trying to pressure you. We just want to make sure you are safe and happy. This house is a lot of work, and we worry about you handling everything alone." Over the following months, the pressure became more subtle but constant. Scarlett would arrive for visits with pamphlets about aging in place safely and articles about the benefits of intergenerational living. She had pointed out potential hazards. I had never noticed a slightly uneven step, a loose handrail, shadows in corners, that could cause confusion at night. "I have worked with so many families dealing with exactly these issues," she would say earnestly. "The elderly parents want to maintain their independence, but the adult children are worried sick about their safety. Usually, the best solution is a gradual transition that honors everyone's needs." David began echoing these concerns. "Mom, Mrs. Henderson down the street fell last month and lay on her kitchen floor for 6 hours before anyone found her. What if that happened to you?" I started to question my own capabilities. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being stubborn and unrealistic about my limitations. When the arthritis in my hands made opening jars difficult, or when ice on my front steps made me nervous about checking the mail, I wondered if I was kidding myself about my independence. The turning point came 18 months ago, when I made a decision that seemed generous at the time, but would prove to have devastating consequences. David and Scarlett had been married for almost 2 years, and their constant hints about needing more space and my supposed vulnerability had worn down my resistance. "I have been thinking about what you said," I told David during one of our regular Sunday phone calls, "about the house being too much for me, and you two needing space for Scarlett's work." I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Mom, are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am considering signing the house over to you," I said, "as a gift, with the understanding that I would continue living here for the rest of my life. That way, you would have the space you need, and I would have the security of knowing my home would stay in the family." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I wondered if we had been disconnected. Then David spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, are you absolutely sure about this? That is an incredibly generous gift. The house should belong to the younger generation," I said, repeating the phrase Scarlett had used so often. "I just need to know I can stay here as long as I am able." "Of course, Mom. This will always be your home." 2 weeks later, we met with Harrison Mitchell, the family attorney who had handled Bob's will and various other legal matters over the years. Harrison was a practical man in his 60s who had known our family for decades. "Ellie, I want to make sure you understand exactly what you are doing," he said as we reviewed the deed transfer documents. "Once you sign this house over to David, it becomes his property. Yes, we are including a life estate clause that guarantees your right to live here until your death. But the legal ownership will be David's." "I understand, Harrison. This is what I want to do." David signed the papers with tears in his eyes, hugging me tightly afterward. "Thank you, Mom. This means everything to us." Scarlett's reaction was more restrained, but I caught a satisfied glint in her eyes as she watched the notarization process. "This is such a beautiful example of a family making decisions from a place of love and trust," she said. The changes began almost immediately. Within a month, David and Scarlett had moved their belongings into my house. Scarlett immediately began optimizing the energy flow by rearranging furniture and hanging crystals in various windows. She converted Bob's former study into what she called a healing sanctuary, complete with meditation cushions and incense burners. "I hope you don't mind," she said, when I discovered she had removed all of Bob's books and papers. "I have put everything in storage boxes in the basement. This room needs to serve its highest purpose now." I minded terribly, but I didn't know how to object without seeming petty. This was their house now, after all. The restrictions started small. Scarlett would ask me to keep the television volume down during her afternoon energy work sessions with clients. She requested that I avoid using the kitchen during certain hours when she was preparing special meals for her workshops. She suggested I might be more comfortable spending my evenings upstairs in my bedroom, rather than in the common areas where her activities might disturb my rest needs. "At your age, Eleanor, maintaining proper sleep hygiene is so important," she would say with seeming concern. "Early bedtimes and consistent routines are essential for cognitive health in seniors." David seemed oblivious to how his wife was gradually erasing my presence from the main living areas of my own home. He worked long hours and often came home exhausted, grateful that Scarlett was there to help me and manage the household. "Isn't it wonderful that Mom has company now?" he would say to friends when they called. "Scarlett's been amazing, really looking out for her well-being." But I was becoming increasingly isolated in what had once been my own home. My morning coffee routine was disrupted by Scarlett's juice cleanses and meditation practices. My afternoon reading time was interrupted by the steady stream of clients coming for wellness consultations. My evening cooking was replaced by Scarlett's elaborate raw food preparations that she insisted were more appropriate for someone with your digestive concerns. I tried to adapt, telling myself this was part of learning to live with family again. When Scarlett suggested I might benefit from some gentle guidance about my wardrobe choices, I listened politely. When she recommended I consider updating my hairstyle to something more age-appropriate, I made an appointment with a new stylist. "You are transforming beautifully, Eleanor," she would say after each change. "Embracing your authentic self at this stage of life is so inspiring." But I felt less like myself with each passing day. The woman looking back at me from the mirror seemed like a stranger, someone smaller, more timid, more willing to accept other people's definitions of who she should be. The breaking point came 2 months ago, on what started as an ordinary Tuesday morning in September. I was sitting in my kitchen, trying to enjoy my coffee, despite the sound of Scarlett's 7 a.m. vocal toning session in the living room. When the phone rang, it was David's supervisor from the Burlington Elder Services office, and her voice carried an urgency that immediately put me on high alert. "Mrs. Whitmore, I am calling about David. He collapsed at work this morning during a client meeting. We have taken him to the university hospital, and the doctors are running tests. But," she paused, searching for words, "I think you should come right away." The next few hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors, medical terminology, and impossible choices. David had suffered a massive heart attack at age 37, no warning signs, no previous symptoms, just a sudden catastrophic failure of an organ that should have served him for decades longer. The doctors explained about blockages and arrhythmias and the damage that occurs when heart muscle is deprived of oxygen. They used phrases like extensive damage and very serious prognosis, but the words that cut through me most clearly were "I am sorry," and there was nothing more we could do. My son died 3 days later, surrounded by machines that had kept his body functioning, while his spirit slipped away. I held his hand and whispered about all the things we had planned to do together, trips we had talked about taking, grandchildren I had hoped to spoil, conversations we had never get to finish. Scarlett's behavior during those 3 days seemed oddly detached. She spent most of her time in the hospital cafeteria, talking quietly on her phone or working on her laptop. When medical staff asked about life support decisions or organ donation preferences, she deferred to me, saying she felt it was more appropriate for David's mother to make those choices. "I am still processing this tragedy from an energetic perspective," she explained to the chaplain. "Sometimes the soul's journey requires transitions that our human minds cannot fully comprehend." The funeral was a surreal blend of David's genuine friends and colleagues mourning a wonderful man, and Scarlett's wellness community offering spiritual platitudes about ascending to higher consciousness. I sat in the front pew of the Methodist church where David had been confirmed, listening to people share memories of his kindness and dedication, while Scarlett whispered comments about celebrating his transformation rather than mourning his physical departure. After the service, as people gathered at my house for the traditional meal, I noticed Scarlett moving through the crowd with something approaching satisfaction. She accepted condolences graciously, but spent more time discussing her plans for honoring David's memory through expanded healing work than grieving his loss. This house has such potential for hosting memorial workshops, I heard her tell one of her clients. David would want his passing to inspire others toward greater spiritual awareness. For the next week, I barely left my bedroom. The house felt emptied of everything that had made it home. David's laughter, his concern for my well-being, his presence as a bridge between my past and present. Scarlett came and went as she pleased, hosting her regular clients and workshops as if nothing fundamental had changed. It was exactly 7 days after David's funeral that Scarlett knocked on my bedroom door. I opened it to find her standing in the hallway, dressed in flowing white clothing that seemed designed to emphasize her role as a spiritual guide rather than a grieving widow. "Eleanor, we need to discuss the current living arrangement," she said, without preamble. "I think we both recognize that this situation isn't serving either of our highest good." I blinked, still processing what she was saying. "What do you mean?" "I mean that it is time for you to explore other housing options. This house belongs to me now as David's widow, and I need to use it for my expanding practice. You would be much happier in a senior living community where you could receive appropriate care and social stimulation." The words hit me like a physical blow. Scarlett, David and I agreed that I would live here for the rest of my life. That was the condition when I signed the house over to him. She smiled with what looked like pity. "Eleanor, I understand this is difficult, but legal ownership is clear. I have consulted with attorneys, and your so-called life estate was dependent on David's continued life. Now that he has passed, I have full discretionary authority over the property." I felt the room spinning around me. "That is not possible." Harrison Mitchell explained the legal protections. "I have documented rights to remain here." "I am afraid you are mistaken about the legal realities," Scarlett continued calmly. "Of course, you are welcome to challenge this through the courts, but that would be expensive and emotionally draining. I have already contacted a very reputable senior living facility that specializes in widows who are struggling with independence issues." The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away. This woman, who had lived in my house for over a year, eaten meals I had prepared, benefited from my generosity, was now discussing my displacement, as if it were a minor administrative detail. "I am giving you 2 weeks to make arrangements," she continued. "That should be sufficient time to pack your personal belongings and coordinate the transition. I have taken the liberty of scheduling a tour at Maple Heights Senior Community for this Friday." I stared at her, searching for any sign of the woman David had fallen in love with, any hint of compassion or recognition of what she was doing to me. But her expression remained serene and determined, as if she were simply implementing a necessary business decision. "This is wrong, Scarlett. This isn't what David wanted." "David is no longer here to express his preferences," she replied. "I have to make decisions based on current realities, not past sentiments. Honestly, Eleanor, you will be much happier around people your own age who understand your limitations." She turned to leave, then paused. "I suggest you start with the items in your bedroom. I will need the rest of the house cleared for my upcoming workshop intensive." That night was the longest of my life. I lay in the bed Bob and I had shared for 30 years, in the room where I would brought David home from the hospital as a newborn, surrounded by the possessions that told the story of my 72 years, and tried to comprehend how completely my world had collapsed. By morning, I knew I couldn't simply accept Scarlett's ultimatum. David had loved me too much to leave me unprotected. There had to be something I was missing, some provision or document that would prove my right to remain in my home. I waited until Scarlett left for one of her workshops, then began searching through David's belongings. His bedroom and the home office he had set up in the spare room were filled with case files from work, personal correspondence, and financial documents that I had never needed to examine before. It was in his desk, the antique roll-top desk that had belonged to Bob's father, that I found the envelope. It was tucked behind a small hidden compartment that Bob had shown me years ago, marked in David's careful handwriting, "For Mom, emergency only." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and found a letter in David's familiar script. "Mom, if you are reading this, something has happened to me, and Scarlett is trying to force you out of the house. I have been worried about this possibility for months now, watching how she treats you and listening to some of the things she says when she thinks I am not paying attention. I have taken steps to protect you. Call Harrison Mitchell immediately and tell him you need to see the documents I filed with him 6 weeks ago. Everything is legal and notarized. You are protected, no matter what Scarlett claims. I love you, Mom. I am sorry I didn't handle this situation better while I was alive. I should have seen who she really was sooner. I should have protected you from her manipulation. But I have tried to fix it now. Don't let her bully you. Don't let her make you believe you have no rights. The house is yours again, and there is nothing she can do about it." I read the letter 3 times before the words fully registered. David had seen through Scarlett's facade. He had recognized the threat she posed to me, and somehow he had taken action to protect me even after his death. I called Harrison Mitchell immediately, my voice shaking as I explained about David's letter and asked about the documents he would supposedly filed. "Oh, thank goodness you called, Ellie," Harrison said. "I was wondering when you had need to know about this. David came to see me about 6 weeks before he died, very concerned about your security if something happened to him. He had discovered some things about Scarlett that worried him deeply." "What kind of things?" "Financial irregularities. For one, unauthorized withdrawals from their joint accounts. Evidence of a relationship with another man, someone from her wellness community, who she had been supporting financially with David's money." I felt sick. David knew about this. He had hired a private investigator to document everything. He was planning to file for divorce, but he wanted to make sure you were protected first. That is why he came to me. Harrison explained that David had executed a new deed transferring the house back to me with all the proper legal safeguards and medical evaluations to ensure it couldn't be challenged. He would also left a video statement explaining his reasoning and his deep concerns about Scarlett's intentions toward me. David was very thorough, Ellie. He anticipated exactly what Scarlett would try to do, and he made sure she couldn't succeed. "Can I see the video? Come to my office this afternoon. Bring the letter David left you. It is time you knew the whole truth about what your son discovered." An hour later, I sat in Harrison's conference room, watching my son's face on a laptop screen. He looked tired and sad, but determined. "Mom, if you are watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you in person what I have learned about Scarlett. I know this will be hard to hear, especially if I am no longer here to help you process it. Scarlett isn't who I thought she was when I married her. Over the past several months, I have discovered that she has been stealing money from our accounts to support another man, someone named Gabriel, who runs some kind of spiritual retreat center in California. She has been planning to leave me once she could gain control of the house." David's image paused, and I could see him gathering his emotional strength to continue. "I found recordings of phone conversations where she talked about dealing with the old woman problem once I was out of the picture. Mom, she has been planning to have you declared mentally incompetent, so she could have you institutionalized and gain full control of the property." I gasped, remembering all the times Scarlett had made subtle comments about my memory or suggested I might be becoming confused about simple things. "I started divorce proceedings last week," David continued. "But first, I had to make sure you were protected. The house is yours again, Mom. legally and irrevocably yours. Scarlett has no claim to it whatsoever. The video showed David leaning closer to the camera, his expression intense. I am ashamed that I brought this person into our lives. I am sorry I was so blind to who she really was. But I will not let her destroy your security or your dignity. You raised me to stand up for what is right, and that is what I am doing now. When the video ended, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the mixture of grief, anger, and gratitude washing over me. My son had seen the truth. He had taken action to protect me. Even in death, he was still taking care of his mother. What do I do now, Harrison? You go home and wait for Scarlett to return. Then you show her the deed, and inform her that she needs to leave immediately. The house belongs to you, and you have every legal right to evict her. What if she challenges it? She can try. But David was very smart about this. He had a complete medical evaluation the day he signed the new deed to prove his mental competency. He documented all of Scarlett's financial fraud and infidelity, and we have his video testimony explaining his reasoning. Harrison handed me a folder containing certified copies of all the relevant documents. Ellie, your son protected you in every way possible. Scarlett has no legal standing whatsoever. I drove home feeling a strange combination of empowerment and sorrow. David had known. He had seen through Scarlett's manipulation and taken steps to save me from her plans. But he had carried that burden alone, trying to shield me from the painful truth about his marriage until he could resolve it himself. Scarlett's car was in the driveway when I arrived. I found her in the living room, speaking on the phone with someone about scheduling a spiritual intensive retreat for the following weekend. I will have to call you back, she said when she saw me. Eleanor, I hope you have had time to process what we discussed yesterday. Have you scheduled your tour of the senior facility? I set the folder of documents on the coffee table between us. Scarlett, I think there has been a misunderstanding about the legal ownership of this house. She glanced at the folder with mild interest. I don't think there is any misunderstanding. The house passed to me as David's widow. It is quite straightforward. Actually, it didn't. I opened the folder and removed the new deed. David transferred the house back to me 6 weeks before he died. The property belongs to me, not to you. For the first time since I had known her, Scarlett's composed expression faltered. She picked up the document and began reading, her face growing paler as she processed the legal language. This is impossible, she said finally. David would never. When did you manipulate him into doing this? I didn't know anything about it until today, I replied calmly. David did this on his own, after he discovered what kind of person you really are. Scarlett's mask of spiritual serenity completely dropped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. You have no proof of when this was signed. I will challenge it in court. I will prove that David was under duress, that you coerced a grieving man into signing away his property. You can try, I said, removing David's video statement from the folder. But you should probably watch this first. I set up my laptop on the coffee table and played David's video for Scarlett. I watched her face as she heard her husband detail her financial theft, her infidelity, and her plans to have me institutionalized. By the end of the recording, she was visibly shaking with rage. You turned my husband against me, she hissed. You poisoned his mind with your jealousy and possessiveness. David discovered the truth about you on his own, I replied. All the evidence is documented. Your relationship with Gabriel, the money you stole, your plans for getting rid of me. It is all here in black and white. Scarlett stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. Fine. You want to play legal games? I will hire the best attorney money can buy. I will prove that you manipulated a sick man into signing fraudulent documents. David wasn't sick when he signed these papers, I said. He had a complete medical evaluation that same day proving his mental competency. The doctor who examined him is prepared to testify about his clear thinking and decision-making capability. This is ridiculous, Scarlett snapped. I am not going anywhere. I have invested too much in building my practice here to be driven out by a bitter old woman who cannot accept that her son chose his wife over his mother. I looked at this woman who had manipulated my son, stolen from him, betrayed him, and planned to destroy me, and felt a calm clarity settle over me. Scarlett, you have 24 hours to remove your belongings from my house. If you are not gone by tomorrow evening, I will have the sheriff's department escort you off the property. She stared at me with undisguised hatred. You will regret this, Eleanor. I have friends in this community. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of vindictive person you really are. Do whatever you think you need to do, I replied. But you will not be doing it from my house. That night, I called my neighbor Mrs. Chen to ask if she could keep an eye on the house while I ran some errands the next day. I didn't trust Scarlett not to try something vindictive or destructive during her final hours in the house. Of course, Eleanor, Mrs. Chen said, I have been worried about you since David's passing. That woman never seemed right to me. All those strange people coming and going at all hours. The next morning, I visited Harrison Mitchell's office again to make sure all the legal protections were in place. Then I stopped by the sheriff's department to inform them about the potential need for assistance with an eviction. We will have a deputy on standby. The desk sergeant assured me property disputes can get heated, and we want to make sure everyone stays safe. When I returned home that afternoon, Scarlett's car was gone. I found a note on the kitchen counter written in her elaborate script. Eleanor, you may have won this round through legal manipulation, but karma will ensure that you receive exactly what you deserve. Enjoy your empty house and lonely old age. I hope the victory was worth destroying your son's happiness and driving away the only person who cared about your well-being. I crumpled the note and threw it away, then walked through my house room by room. Scarlett had taken everything that belonged to her, but she would also removed several items that had belonged to David or to Bob and me, family photographs, a silver letter opener that had been Bob's, some of David's books, and personal mementos. The loss of those items stung, but not enough to pursue legal action. I wanted Scarlett completely out of my life, and recovering a few material possessions wasn't worth prolonging the conflict. What mattered was that my home was mine again. The house felt lighter somehow, as if a dark cloud had lifted. I could cook my own meals again, watch television in my own living room, sit on my front porch without feeling like an intruder in my own space. That evening, I called my friend Margaret Sullivan, who had been David's third-grade teacher many years ago. Margaret, it is Eleanor Whitmore. I know this might sound strange, but would you like to come over for coffee tomorrow? I feel like I haven't had a real conversation with a friend in months. I would love to, Eleanor. I have been meaning to check on you since David's service. How are you managing? Better than I expected, I said, looking around my quiet kitchen. I think I am going to be just fine. Over the following weeks, I began to reclaim my life. I reached out to old friends, resumed my volunteer work at the community library, and started tending Bob's rose garden again. The house felt like home for the first time since Scarlett had moved in. But the isolation of the previous months had taken a toll. The house was too big for one person, and some evenings the silence felt overwhelming. I found myself missing not David and Bob's presence, but simply the sound of other people living their lives nearby. It was during one of these quiet evenings that I remembered a conversation I had had with David years earlier about affordable housing for young people in Vermont. He had been frustrated by how many college students and young professionals struggled to find decent, affordable places to live in our area. Mom, if I had a big house like yours, I would rent out rooms to students, he had said during one of our discussions about housing costs. Young people need safe, affordable places to live while they are getting their education or starting their careers. The idea took root gradually. I had 3 bedrooms on the second floor that hadn't been used since David was in high school. With some minor modifications, they could become comfortable apartments for students or young professionals who needed an affordable place to live. I called a contractor I had known since Bob's days as a principal, Tom Walsh, whose daughter had been in my 4th grade class 20 years ago. Eleanor, "I think that is a wonderful idea," he said when I explained my plan. "Those rooms have good natural light and private access through the back stairs. With some updating, they would make perfect student housing." The renovation project gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I worked with Tom to design small but comfortable living spaces, each with a kitchenette and private bathroom. We soundproofed the walls and installed separate entrances to ensure privacy for both my tenants and myself. By spring, I was ready to advertise the apartments. The first person to respond was a young woman named Jessica Torres, a graduate student in environmental science at the university. She was working on her thesis about water quality in Vermont's streams and rivers research that reminded me powerfully of David's dedication to helping others. "Mrs. Whitmore, this would be perfect for me," Jessica said when she toured the apartment. "I spend most of my time either in the lab or doing field research, so I just need a quiet place to study and sleep. And the rent you are asking is so reasonable compared to other options in the area." As Jessica settled into her apartment, I realized how much I enjoyed having young energy in the house again. She was respectful and quiet, but her presence, the sound of her footsteps upstairs, the light in her windows at night, the occasional knock on my door when she needed to borrow a measuring cup made the house feel alive in a way it hadn't since David's childhood. Soon, the other two apartments were rented to Maria Santos, a nursing student at the community college, and Kevin Thompson, a recent college graduate working at a local environmental consulting firm. Both were serious, hard-working young people who reminded me of the students I would taught over the years. My tenants quickly became an informal family. Jessica would knock on my door with extra soup when she was cooking dinner. Maria would help me carry groceries when she saw me returning from the store. Kevin, who had grown up on a farm, volunteered to help with heavy yard work and minor household repairs. "Mrs. Whitmore," Jessica said one evening when she stopped by to return a book I would lent her, "I hope you know how grateful we are for this arrangement. It is not just the affordable rent, it is having a real home, with someone who cares about us as people rather than just rent checks." 6 months after Scarlett's departure, I received an unexpected phone call from Harrison Mitchell. "Ellie, I thought you should know that Scarlett filed a legal challenge to David's deed transfer. Her attorney is claiming that David was mentally incompetent due to stress and grief when he signed the documents." I felt a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Do we need to worry about this?" "Not at all," Harrison said confidently. "We have David's medical evaluation, his video testimony, and documented evidence of Scarlett's fraud and infidelity. Plus, I have discovered some additional information about her background that makes her claims even less credible." "What kind of information?" "It turns out this isn't the first time Scarlett has targeted vulnerable families. I have found records of similar situations in 2 other states' relationships with older or recently widowed men, followed by attempts to gain control of their property and assets." The legal challenge was resolved within 3 months. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including David's video statement and the medical evaluation proving his competency, and dismissed Scarlett's case entirely. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees and return the personal items she had taken from the house. Mrs. Beaumont's claims are not only without merit, but appear to represent a pattern of predatory behavior, the judge stated in his written decision. Mr. David Whitmore clearly understood the implications of his actions and took appropriate legal steps to protect his mother's welfare. I never saw Scarlett again after that final day when she moved out of my house. According to Harrison, she left Vermont entirely after losing the court case. I occasionally wondered if she had found another target for her manipulations, but mostly I tried not to think about her at all. Instead, I focused on the life I was building with my young tenants. Jessica completed her master's thesis and was accepted into a PhD program at the university. Maria graduated from nursing school and took a job at the local hospital. Kevin was promoted at his environmental consulting firm and started taking graduate courses in the evenings. "You are like the grandmother I never had," Maria told me one evening when we were sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset. "My family is all in Texas, and I have felt so isolated here sometimes. But you have made Vermont feel like home." On the first anniversary of David's death, my tenants helped me plant a memorial garden in the backyard. We chose native Vermont plants that would attract birds and butterfly species that David had always loved. Jessica contributed wildflowers whose seeds she had collected during her research trips. Maria chose herbs that could be used for healing. Kevin selected fruit trees that would provide food for wildlife. Your son would be proud of what you have created here, Jessica said, as we worked together, our hands dirty from planting, and our faces warmed by the afternoon sun. You have turned your grief into something beautiful that helps other people. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, looking out at the memorial garden and thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. Losing David had been devastating, and Scarlett's betrayal had nearly destroyed my faith in my own judgment. But somehow, David's final gift had protected me and given me the foundation to build something meaningful from the wreckage. I thought about the letter David had left me, hidden in his father's old desk until I needed it most. Even in death, my son had continued to take care of me, anticipating Scarlett's cruelty and ensuring that I would have the tools to defend myself. The house that Bob and I had bought as young newlyweds, where we had raised our son and built our life together, had become something new, a bridge between generations, a place where experience and youth could support each other. A home in the truest sense of the word. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jessica, calling from her apartment upstairs. Mrs. Whitmore, I hate to bother you, but my mom is coming to visit next week, and I was wondering if you would like to join us for dinner on Saturday. She has been dying to meet the wonderful landlady I am always telling her about. I would love to, I said, smiling, as I looked around my kitchen, in my house filled with the voices and lives of people who had chosen to make it their home too. As I hung up the phone, I heard Kevin's music playing softly from his apartment, and the sound of Maria studying at her desk. The house was full of life again, but this time it was life I had chosen, created, and nurtured. David's final gift had been more than just legal protection. He had given me the opportunity to discover who I could become when I stopped letting other people define my worth and capabilities. At 72, I wasn't an aging woman being pushed toward irrelevance. I was the matriarch of a chosen family, a mentor to young people starting their careers, a woman with purpose and dignity intact. That night, I slept peacefully in the bed I had shared with Bob for 30 years, in the house that held all our memories, surrounded by the sounds of young lives beginning their stories. And I knew that somewhere, David was smiling at what his mother had become. What would you have done in Eleanor's situation? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more tales of resilience, family drama, and finding strength in unexpected places. Life has a way of testing us, but sometimes those tests reveal just how strong we really are. Thanks for reading. And remember, it is never too late to reclaim your power and create the life you deserve.